First of all, on behalf of the ING team, a big welcome to everyone for joining us. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're all joining together today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Important to pay our respects to elders past, present, and of course emerging. Speaking of different generations, I think the Sense of Us report that we've put out and shared with you all today really brings together exactly how each generation is feeling about the future, how they're feeling about the present, and what they're doing in terms of adjusting their life goals, their habits, and ultimately their relationship with money, given everything that's going on. One of the threads of all the conversations that I've had with everyone in the short time that we've been together this evening is just the level of uncertainty that Aussies are faced with at the moment. There seems to be a whole lot of stuff going on away from home, close to home, and this level of uncertainty is definitely permeating how we're feeling about life, how we're approaching life. And we're an incredibly pragmatic lot, so it's also changing our habits on a daily basis. But I don't want to steal too much of Matt's punchlines and insights. You know, this report is literally there for all of you to share with your customers, your audience, your colleagues. If you really want to, you can put it on your family dinner table and have a chat. It is really designed just to open up those conversations between the generations, amongst the generations, and to ensure that we have a really open and honest conversation about money, about how we're feeling and about how our habits are changing. And you can see there we're starting to do this longitudinally, because as a bank, if we can understand how people are feeling and their relationships with their money and what problems they're trying to solve, we think we'll do a better job at helping them solve them. And I know that that's what you all do as well. So in closing, before I hand to Matt, I just want to say thank you to everyone here who generates content, who writes stories, and who makes sure that Aussies are more informed about either what's going on more broadly in the world, about what's going on in our economy, in politics, in policy, and in money. A educated and empowered society financially can make a whole lot more choices about their lives outside of their finances. No one gets out of bed in the morning and says, I want to do banking and finance today. They get out of bed to live life. And thank you to each and every one of you for continuing to talk about some really important topics in really open, honest, and accessible ways. We really appreciate it and look forward to chatting with you after we do a little bit more content. But as I said, Matt Bowen, who is going to jump on stage now, has way more statistics in his head than what I do from this report. So I'm going to hand it over to him. But thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, don't do that. It'd be great for the camera, though. Firstly, thanks everyone for coming along. It's really great to be able to share this with the entire room. I think, as Mel said, it's great to empower content creators and storytellers. We love the fact that we're taking a point of view through this report. We've captured so much data, so much insight. I will bore you to death if I walk through the 20 pages. So the intent for me over the next 10 minutes is to really just touch the surface, but we're going to really bring this to life post my 10 minutes with a chat with Mel, a chat facilitated by Sacha, who is a fantastic journalist for The Briefing, and we've got two everyday Aussies in here who are going to share their story about what money means to them, some of the challenges they're facing, and provoke thought on whether we've hit the nail on the head with this report or actually they see things very differently. So firstly, thanks so much for coming. On your little entry card, there's a QR code. I want to do a shameless plug for that QR code. One of the great things of COVID and digital is we have these QR codes. That'll be your access to the report. So at 8:30, well, it's sort of live now, the report's live, but at 8:30 we're also going to produce a whole bunch of sound bites and assets and other bits of content from this evening as well. So if you really want to create some great stories off the back of this, feel free to jump on there after 8:30. I also want to do a shameless plug for YouGov, who are our research partners for this report. It's really important that when we produce these things that they're robust, right? And so we partner with YouGov to make sure that, as Mel said, we're taking a sample of the culture and the pulse of Aussies at the right moments and with the right statistical validity. So it gives us confidence that we can share and shout about these results, but it should also give you a little bit of confidence about the report as well. And based on the conversations I've had already with so many people in the room, there's a lot of common threads of what you're hearing from your audience in your community with what we're seeing in the report as well. So let's dive in. Look, the first thing I want to acknowledge is the title of the report. We called it No Worries, Not Quite, because clearly there are a lot of worries, right? If you think about what's happened over the past couple of years, we've had COVID, we've got high interest rates, we've got high inflation, we've got slowing wage growth, we've got a war. There is a lot of things that Aussies are concerned about right now, and that really comes out in the report. 83% of Aussies are saying that type of stuff is holding us back financially. But the really interesting tension that we really want to flush through this report is the idea that despite all of that, we've drawn a line. We've actually said, yes, that stuff is complex, but we're really positive about the future, and we're positive because of the way that we're shaping and changing our everyday behaviours. So that really is the central tenet of everything that we'll talk about this evening. And when we start to demonstrate some of the behaviours that people have shared with us, these things won't surprise you. They're not meant to be quite profound, but actually when you start to think about all of these loose threads and we pull them together for you, it demonstrates a resilient, adaptive society that are really leaning in to the challenges that they're facing and not letting go of ambition and the goals that they've set for themselves. So let me talk to you about, firstly, that idea of the mindset shift. So this, for us, is probably one of the most important things that we've pulled from the report. It's not surprising that people are struggling financially when it comes to groceries, when it comes to fuel, when it comes to everyday cost of living. And what we love about the report is actually that rather than get too caught up and throw your hands up and say it's all too hard, we've gone the opposite direction. We've really doubled down on our everyday behaviours and made sure that actually that is where we find confidence and control. If we can bring things closer to home and really be intentional about the decisions that we're making, either at the grocery store, at the petrol station, at the holiday we go on, those little micro moments in your kind of spending or purchasing journey empower you. It gives you agency, and when you've got agency, you feel more in control. When you're in control, you're kind of empowered to make the right decisions, and that gives us a lot of positivity. So that for us is kind of one of the most beautiful and kind of inspiring findings through all of this. If you get too caught up in the headlines in the media, you'll kind of quickly see how kind of negative it all is, and it's all a little bit grim. But actually, there is a real undercurrent of optimism and strength within our society that we want to shine a bit of a spotlight on throughout this. And we call this kind of the small wins economy. There's a whole section within the report on this idea of small wins. And small wins can deliver big gains over the long term. One of the most obvious examples of this is kind of how we're behaving in the supermarkets. I want to touch on that really closely. We've all seen the ABS data about inflation, about kind of the cost of meat and fresh produce, and it's probably gone up 30% over the past few years. When the Aussies self-reported how much they're spending on groceries, actually we didn't see the same delta. We didn't see such a big spike. And the reason that's happened is because people are already making changes. Instead of buying expensive premium brands on the shelf, they're choosing to go for the supermarket-owned brands. They're slowing down on their consumption of meat, for example, or substituting that for a different style of protein. And they're the decisions, the small decisions that we can make, which again ladder up to big financial consequences in the long term in terms of not letting go of that ambition. The other one is loyalty programs. So there's a lot in the report around loyalty programs. Once upon a time, this was kind of a niche activity for the coupon collectors out there. Actually, this is mainstream behaviour now. So, in fact, 83%, 84% of Aussies are part of a loyalty program. 70% of them use them on an active basis. And they tell us the stored value within those programs are up to around $250. So, again, that's a meaningful number by just tapping your rewards card at the supermarket or collecting some points at the servo, whatever that may be. And all of this kind of gives us, again, a little bit more agency around where we're putting those dollars. So typically around financial pinch points throughout the year, there was a lot of discussion around Christmas last year around people tapping into those loyalty programs and actually cashing them in, frankly. When budgets are already tight, you use those moments to cash in and gives us a little bit more agency. When we think about the long-term goals, actually those things haven't changed too much, which again is quite surprising. It would be easy to believe that people are throwing their hands up. Actually, the housing market is a challenge, and there's a lot of debate about that at the moment. What we see in the report is actually there's still a lot of ambition in that space. Savings as a goal continues to be the number one goal for Aussies. 48% of them have it within their top 3 goals for the year. And there's an interesting theme as well around human connection. Spending time with family and friends has actually grown in its importance over the past 3 years as well. So again, we deduce from that we're really getting clear that longer term, we still have that ambition and that aspiration. How we get there though has shifted quite considerably, and there's much more of a focus now on the pathway to unlocking those goals. Spending as a category, I talked about some of the more intentional behaviours that we're making on a day-to-day basis. I really want to anchor the point that it's not reckless, it's not this kind of you only live once type attitude that younger generations have. To Mel's point, there's a lot of data in the report around cross-generational behaviours, and what you'll see in some of the ways that they have rewritten the money playbook is actually that they're making very deliberate decisions. They're not kind of going out and recklessly spending. They will shop the sales, and they shop the sales because they know that that's a great way of stretching their budgets a little bit further. So they still consume, they're still purchasing, they're still shopping online. That's growing in popularity, but they're doing it in such a way where they're being quite savvy and quite deliberate about when every dollar comes out of their pocket, which again feels like a really great place for Australians. I really want to touch on the pathway to unlocking those future goals. Again, this is something in the report that we're calling the money playbook, and it's changed quite considerably. Our parents will often tell us how they bought their first home, and you hear this you'll see this in the data in the report, that actually it's driving a little bit of tension with younger generations because the context is completely different, right? Debt to income ratios are completely fundamentally changed from what they were when our parents grew up. So the younger generation now turning to more digital and accessible routes for information and advice. We know the rise of things like ChatGPT to capture financial advice. That's captured in the report. But they're also much more risk aware and open to taking on risk in terms of growing that outlook for their wealth and their income as well. So we're seeing clear examples of younger generations being super interested in investing in shares and ETFs. They see that as a nice pathway to growing their wealth, and also seeing it as an income stream on the side. The rise of the side hustle, we've all heard about it anecdotally. Clearly it's proven in this report as well that younger generations are looking for not that long, stable, steady, single income career. They're looking for multiple ways to be able to grow their wealth, grow their income, and unlock those future goals as well. As I said, there's plenty in the report. Please download it and trawl through it. If you have any questions throughout the night, we will be here, happy to entertain any of those for you and share other things that we have. But the most exciting and the most important thing of this evening is the conversation we're about to have. So I'd like to really welcome to the stage Sacha, who is the host of the Briefing podcast. She's going to facilitate a great chat with Mel, our CEO. And as I mentioned, we have Nathan and Sarah in the room who are going to share a little bit of their lived experience in this environment as well. So please, if you can join me in welcoming to the stage.
Hi everyone. I'm sorry. Did you guys pick this venue because it's all orange? I was looking around and I was like, that's orange, the seats are orange. I'm like, surely this wasn't an accident. Thanks all for coming. I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. I think, we in the media, we always are talking about cost of living and things are expensive, and it can get really tiring, I think, not only for us to constantly be talking about it. It exists, it's real, but I think, broadening out our thinking of how that's actually playing out in people's spending habits. Are people actually, living that way? Has the great Australian dream died? I don't think so, and I think we're going to see evidence that it hasn't as we have this conversation tonight. I thought it'd be great to start with you, Mel. You're in a pretty unique position. You're the CEO of a major bank. What do you think your role is in the conversation around how Australians feel about their money?
Well, I think the first thing, which I touched on a little bit earlier, is making sure that we share the insights and information that we have. So Australians get their information and insight and education from a whole range of sources. And while we do this report because we want to understand it ourselves, and I'll touch on that next, how we act on what we find, it's important to share it broadly, so that we can have the important conversations that we need to have about specific challenges, about problems that we need to solve, and about things that we can do across all parts of society. So there's a role for banks, there's a role for government, there's a role for educational institutions, journalists, you name it. So I think sharing that information is really critical. And then secondly, obviously, as a leader of a team, it's ensuring that I'm creating an organisation where people see value in those insights, where we pride ourselves at ING on really caring about solving customer problems. I do make light of it when I say people don't get up out of bed to do their banking. But really, if we're going to be the best at what we do, we have to understand how customers think about life, not just how they think about money. Because unless you really understand that, you actually can't help people get ahead. And then I think the importance of this conversation is amplified because of the uncertainty in the environment more broadly. Don't get me started on housing. You got me started on housing this morning. When we're living in a scenario where the median house price in Australia is 8 times the median full-time salary, we're out of equilibrium. And so helping Aussies as much as we can find that pathway is absolutely critical, because we speak about housing a lot as a wealth generator, becoming rich, all the rest of it. But housing for most Aussies is about a roof over your head, security, community, not having to pick up every time the landlord wants to do something with a house. And so it's really important to help us advocate for some of those really important policy changes as well.
I want to touch on optimism, because I think that was the overriding thing that came from this latest Sense of Us report, was that especially younger Aussies, which is interesting because I think we go, oh, well, younger Aussies are living in unprecedented times. There's this joke that people don't want to, I just want to live in precedented times, not unprecedented times. I'm pretty sure I've said that before. But, it came through that millennials and Gen Z are among the most optimistic. Why do you think we're seeing that?
I really think that those generations of Australian have drawn a line and said, there's all this stuff that's going to happen for the rest of my life. It's because it's happened for most of my life. So I'm going to focus on the things on my side of the line. And in that, I feel like I've now got control. I get a great sense of satisfaction, of agency, of freedom, of controlling the things that I can control, and not giving energy or worry to the things that younger generations can't control. I think the report, this brings me a lot of hope, really shows the entrepreneurial spirit of, in particular, younger generations of Aussies. So 12% of Australians said that they were looking at creating a side hustle of some sort over the next 12 months. That was 19% for Gen Zs. So you really see that hustle and that fire in the belly and that entrepreneurial spirit. And I think a lot of the positivity is shown in statistics like that, because to start up your own business in itself, and I know that there's a lot of small business people in the room, is about hope, it's about positivity, and it's about having a go, having a crack, taking a bit of risk. And so that really comes through. And so I think that really explains the positivity. The flip side of that question is, how do you explain negativity of the baby boomers? Baby boomers lived through the 1980s and 90s recession. They've lived through more global conflict. And they also have a shorter time horizon when it comes to investing, course correction, so on and so forth. So they've got more to lose with big losses in terms of wealth and investing decisions, and many of them would have also seen what the global financial crisis did to their superannuation balance. So the other side of this discussion is, why are older generations a little bit more negative? And so there's some insight into that as well.
That might be a good time to bring in Nathan. You're 27, you're an engineer, and your big goal at the moment is, the one that we always talk about, which is housing. How are you approaching trying to achieve that goal in these unprecedented times?
Yeah, I think it's never been particularly easy. It's been naive to say that no one's ever had to work hard and save for a house and that sort of stuff. So I take it with a grain of salt that we talk about the unprecedented times and all that sort of stuff. There's always bad times. But for me, I'm trying to sort of be a little bit strategic about it. My partner and I are looking to buy together, and so we've sort of come up with a bit of a strategy where I'm going to, take on a little bit more of the repayment side, and she's going to take on more of the deposit side. So, I'm trying to sort of boost my income. I'm doing all that sort of investing. We talk about shares, ETFs, cryptos. I've got a little bit of everything sort of thing. So I'm trying really hard to do that, increase our borrowing power, all that sort of stuff.
Well, that's something, I'll jump in because that's something that Matt was talking about. And I found that interesting because while it's like, oh, great, we have these opportunities, 30, 40 years ago, like our parents, they could get a full-time job and, mum could be at home with the kids and dad could be working a full-time job and you could still buy a house and you could still make those repayments. Do you feel like it's a little bit unfair the way that it's ended up where you're having to find all of those extra income streams?
Yeah, it does feel that way. And whenever someone gives you advice, it's usually someone who's been through it, 20, 30 years prior and it's all about, buckle down and save and you'll get there eventually sort of thing. But I want to be a little bit more proactive than that. I don't want to, just keep waiting, keep renting, keep, letting time tick away. I've got a long runway. I'm only 27, but I may as well make the most of it and sort of get in the air as quickly as possible, so to speak. So I think it makes sense for me to try and do these extra things anyway. But yeah, it certainly is a little bit hard, sort of hearing everyone else's stories from however long ago, and it's just one person, like the single salary and all that. So it is hard, but we make do.
Well, I guess you have those choices, which, it's kind of what comes through in the report, right? We're adaptable. Sarah, you're 39, you're a small business owner, and you went from working for a boss and as an employee to owning your own business, which I think is probably another, it's a way that we try and build our own wealth that belongs purely to us. How scary was it to make that leap and go, I want to make that decision for my financial future? And how much were you shaped by kind of what's going on in the world right now when you made that call?
Like in terms of how scary it was so scary. Yeah, it kind of almost still didn't feel real when I was going through it. Like the first few months, I reckon, were a bit numb. And yeah, just the economy, you got to that stage, I guess you just had to it was such a passion of mine, you had to listen to that side of you, because if you listened purely to like the financial sides and the economies, it just would call you, like you kind of go back into your hole and be like, no, it's too hard, I can't do that. And so you sort of have to just put on a bit of armour, I guess, and tell yourself, well, you can have that attitude, or you can start to be sort of, well, I've got to try, And hearing everyone's stories, quite frankly, I got to the stage where I was like, it doesn't matter how much people were earning, what they were doing, everyone had some kind of financial stress or burden. It was maybe just they were exacerbated. The more you earned, the bigger they were. So I kind of felt like you're going to have them anyway. So yeah, it still made it scary, and you still had to do it a bit strategically, but it kind of was a bit of a either take the leap or don't, because it's not going to happen otherwise.
Well, you had to sell your house, didn't you, in order to achieve that dream? How big of a decision was that for you, given what we know that it is the Australian dream to own your own home, but you had to give that up? What was that like?
It was hard. I mean, I will be honest, that wasn't the only decision. There were others that fed into it, but it certainly was. My basic idea was, if I wanted to run my own business, I couldn't also afford a mortgage. So it was one or the other. So I chose the business side of things. But yeah, it was hard, I think, especially because I worked so darn hard for it. It felt like my entire adult life, just like that, had sort of gone, which I know is melodramatic, it's not the case, but it kind of does feel like that at times. And when you did it all on your own as well, and just silly things like with the generational thing, I felt like I'd made my dad so proud, and it was so sort of heartbreaking to be like, Dad, I'm selling it, to kind of follow my passion. And he was awesome and stuff, but yeah, it just, I guess, sort of really made that decision really apparent, you know what I mean? It was sort of just one less thing to sort of slap you in the face about.
I'm curious to know where you're at now on that journey. Are you back to trying to save for a house? Have you kind of made your small business successful, and then that dream is still there and still within your reach? Do you feel positive about trying to achieve that again?
I feel like I know it will happen. I think because I'm inherently a saver. It's in my nature, and it's still a goal of mine, yes, to own another property. But anytime soon, I just don't think so. And will it be in Sydney? Absolutely not, sort of thing. But the business is going. It's like it still continues to be an absolute roller coaster of a ride. And I definitely don't feel I am like in control of things enough to be able to look at buying or anything next. So yes, I would love to get there again, but truthfully, I think it does feel like a bit of a long goal at the moment. Yeah.
Well, Mel, I interviewed you on the briefing this morning, and we talked about that idea of the dream to own a home and business. It still exists, but the way we get there has shifted. How are we seeing that play out in customer habits?
Yeah, so I'll start with the cost savings habits first, and then I'll talk about income. So in the cost space, it's definitely about looking at the way we shop, and grocery is the number one area where we see a lot of things happening. So 83% of Aussies saying that they are proactively shifting their shopping habits. 55% actually went a step further than that and said, I've changed my diet in order to reduce the cost of living pressure of my supermarket basket. Shoppers are turning to cost over convenience, so visiting multiple supermarkets, so searching for lower cost supermarkets for some parts of their shopping basket, and then staying on their usual habits for other parts. So we might get to wellness and looking after ourselves, but we're least likely to give up our fantastic meat, fish, and fresh veggies. So that's the one area where we don't see as much substitution, but definitely a lot of changes in the supermarket space. Then we've just got the use of technology, comparison websites, rewards programs, whatever, to shop for a bargain. So just that information proliferation, being able to access information at the touch of a button or in your pocket, and really acting on that. So shopping sales, just being savvy more broadly. And then I guess on the income side, it's interesting listening to someone who's using higher risk, higher return investments in order to grow wealth or get an income. So Aussies are also not just looking to cut costs, but look for new sources of income, particularly if I've got a full-time job. As I said earlier, 19% of Gen Zs, 12% of Aussies looking for a side hustle of some sort. That looks very different in a gig economy, in an environment where the cost of entry of starting up a small business is maybe lower or perceived lower than what it used to be. Younger generations definitely investing more actively in shares, ETFs and crypto, not just for capital growth, but for income generation. So they see it as a way to add to their weekly income. And just looking for, different ways of saving money. We obviously are famous for our high interest savings accounts. We're seeing shopping in our industry as well. Very few Aussies hold one savings account now if they're saving. They're using 2 to 3 banking apps a day. So they're even shopping and spreading their savings across multiple banks in order to maximise their returns. So this is not just a story about, tightening our belts and not living life. It's also, as I said, about being really informed and feeling like you have the agency and power to go off and grow your income side of your story as well, so you can save more quickly than you otherwise would.
Yeah, well, so that's kind of, achieving those goals, whether it be small business or home ownership. But something else that came through in the report was this idea of a joy economy, which I think, I know for me, like I'm millennial and, I live life by the live your best life kind of thing, buy that bottle of wine, go see that movie if you want to. How much are other people doing that? It's not just me, is it?
It is not just you at all. And that's why I think having the philosophy, even as a banker, it is the best philosophy to have, that people ultimately want to have control over their money. They want to build wealth, not to be rich on paper, but to live life. That's essentially what we're all trying to achieve, and that's what this report really focuses on. And that can be about having an awesome house or the security of the property ladder. It can be about the joy of running your own business in a space that you absolutely love. And so we define that ourselves as individuals, and there's not one way, there's not one destination and not one way of getting there. But after saving, spending time with family and friends is the number 2 life goal. And it used to be travel after COVID, after we're all locked up. It switched and we're back to, living in a society where it's not just about saving, it is about spending time with family and friends. And it's not, I think Matt touched on this, it's not about frivolous spending. It's actually about spending meaningful time with people, and $1 spent having a great night out or having a lovely meal surrounded by people that you care about is just as important as the overseas trip or the house or whatever. So I think as a society and a community, we're still social animals, and those things will always matter because we're human.
Nathan, do you identify with that idea of you still want to make space for that even while you're trying to achieve what can feel like a pretty insurmountable goal sometimes? You want to make time to find the joy in life as well?
I do. And you've sort of got to take it as a bit of a balance as well with your other financial goals and things like that. So one thing that I have sort of started seeing is a little bit more of a shift away from sort of when you go and see your friends, spending a little bit less. You don't have to go out for such a expensive dinner or anything like that. You don't have to, go out and have a million beers at the pub sort of thing. It's becoming a little more low key, so to speak, where I think maybe it's just my age, but the people around me are also in similar positions where they're trying to start saving a little bit more, and one of the best ways to do that is to reduce your spending. So yeah, I think it is about a balance, and I certainly identify with still wanting to have all the good stuff without sort of sacrificing on the other goals.
Is there something that you will always splurge on? You can't go without it?
I don't know. I think I'm a pretty low maintenance person, so I don't think so. No.
Beers at the pub.
Well, as fun as that is, I am happy to save a bit there as well.
Yeah.
We'll offer him a home loan when he's ready. There you go. No splurging.
Well, they do go through all of that, don't they?
Yeah, we do.
I just had to do that, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of Uber Eats on here. Sarah, what about you? Where are you finding the joy when it comes to, not focused on your business outside of that space?
Do you know what, the whole concept of even finding joy in spending, I think it sounds really lame, but it's a bit of a revelation for me. Having been a saver my entire life, and it was save for uni, go to uni, save for a house, buy a house. It's I just feel oh my God, to spend the money and actually enjoy spending it. So it just everyday little things, whether it's, I don't know, a new top for the gym, whatever, it's more of a mindset thing around, it doesn't matter what it is, just enjoying the moment to be able to it's actually okay to spend money. We earn money, it's not just for saving, it's for spending too. And it doesn't matter if it's a $5 glass of wine or a 500 bottle of champagne, whatever. If that feels right for you and that's what you want to do in the moment, it's your money, and just have the joy in spending it and enjoy it, because otherwise it's just going to sit in the bank and
Mel, we were all yelled at a few years ago for eating avo on toast.
And
I think that's kind of where the joy, but that's kind of, I identify joy as a cafe breakfast, right?
Okay.
Can we have both? Is that what you're seeing in customers and people who have responded in this survey? Do people feel like they can have the avo on toast and have that big financial goal of, a business or saving for a house?
Yes. And I'm not going to delve deep into the avo on toast because I think it's the one symbol that has been weaponised against Gen Z over the last few years, because what this report tells you is that Gen Z is focused on so many other things other than designer avo on toast. So the hustle, the drive, all the rest of it in saving the money and reining in our belts in areas where we don't get joy. So, the substitution, spreading our dollars further through rewards cards, all the rest of it. We feel like we can reward ourselves by doing something that's meaningful for us. For some people, that is about going out and spending time with family and friends. For others, it's about saving up and feeling like you deserve a new top for the gym or a new outfit or whatever it might be. The other piece in the joy economy that we cover later on in the report is also wellness broadly. I mean, a lot of what we've talked about this evening, we've attached joy to booze, food, all of the good stuff that many of us do enjoy. But joy is also being found in the wellness space. And there's a page in the report towards the end on this, not because it's least important, because it's just positioned there in the findings. And what you see is also all generations making space for continued investments in their own health and well-being, whether that's supplements and things like that, but also gym memberships, exercise, and making sure that we're looking after ourselves and living longer, so on and so forth. There's probably some connectivity or correlation between that and our lack of willingness to substitute high-quality fruit and veg and protein as well. So you also get a sense that the joy economy is not just about doing all the things that we're told is bad for us and we should do in moderation, but there's a lot of joy being found in looking after our wellness as well. And interestingly, men are doing it better than women.
No.
Yes. Men are far more likely to be investing in that part of their joy than what the average Australian woman is.
Okay, that's an interesting one. We've got a few minutes left for the panel before we open it up for questions. So if you do have a question, get ready to ask it. What do you feel like your great dream is, and how are you going to move forward now, with all of the things going on in the outside world? How are you focusing in on your own goal and blocking out the noise?
Yeah, it's a great question, because so much will change between now and whatever the end goal is, right? And so I think that level of financial resilience is really what the goal is. I want to be in a position personally where I don't have to be so reliant on going to work every day and that's my only source of income and I'm paycheck to paycheck. I want to make sure that I'm established well enough and I'll be able to support all my own needs and things like that on my own. I guess it's a little bit of financial independence is sort of the longer term goal. So in and amongst all the various uncertainties along the way and any sort of hiccups, I think it's sort of one begets the other, and the financial resilience is really what my longer term goal is there.
Thank you for sharing, very much appreciated. Sarah, what about yourself? How are you kind of going to forge ahead? We're told everything's doom and gloom, but we can't live in that space all the time, can we? So what are you hoping to achieve, as you look ahead?
Just staying laser focused on my business really, and every day getting up and believing in it. And I'll be honest, I haven't hit the targets I wanted to hit yet, but I'm I'm doing it. I'm sort of in the process. So head down, just keep going, and just sort of, it can be doom and gloom, but it's a bit of a mindset shift, and it's actually been really helpful to hear this kind of feedback. And I think because everyone's feeling it as well, it does help because you can talk to people. You don't feel like you're the only one suffering. It's you can just have the conversations now, and that helps. Everyone's on their own journey, but I think for me it's just staying focused. I've come so far and sort of thinking look, it's rough, it's hard, but life's always going to throw curveballs, so we'll find a way to get through it and make it work.
And I think that's pretty much epitomises everything that was in the Sense of Us report. Thank you all for sharing. We do have time for some questions if anyone has any, for Mel or for Sarah or for Nathan. They can be about anything. It can be about the report itself. It can be about Nathan or Sarah's personal experiences. Yes?
Sarah, I'd love to hear what your business is so we can all support you.
Oh, good one. Yes. Love.
You're awesome, thank you. So I'm a nutritionist and online coach. So my business is Sarah Litch Fitness and Nutrition, and it's online fitness and nutrition coaching. Yeah, and I do face-to-face for anyone that lives in Narrabeen as well.
Just Narrabeen? Broaden it out.
Okay, Northern Beaches.
No, sorry, oh my God, I didn't mean to force you to change your brand.
Yeah, it's quick into the website, change that.
Yeah, great call, good question. Anyone else?
Mel, why was it important for ING to do this report? You could go on carrying on your business. Why take the time to do this study?
We pride ourselves on wanting to do things differently and better than most in terms of helping customers solve problems or catch opportunities. we don't see the only way to do that is through products and rates and all the rest of it, which we're also famous for that. But there's a lot we can do in terms of providing better experiences digitally or through our contact centre or through our team that deal with customers on a day-to-day basis. And if you want to say that you're focused on helping people and actually really wanting to make a difference, you have to understand things like we've tried to understand this. And that's also why we've run the report 3 times. So what we're trying to do here is also build a longitudinal study. And I think this year we're more convinced than ever that what we've seen is actually a structural shift in how Australians are thinking about the future and their relationship with money. And yeah, if you want to say that you're the bank that helps people better than everyone else, it's a pretty good place to start. And then I will say the reason for sharing it is because we also feel that it's our obligation to help everyone improve. And I think there's a lot of insights in here that content creators, journalists, as I said, will share it with policy creators who drive housing policy, consumer policy, whatever it might be, just so that people have a bit more of a finger on the pulse around what's going on, not just at a macro level, because you can get lost in averages as well, but at a generational level. So that's why. And it's interesting, we're curious, and we want to help solve some of these problems. Yeah.
Hi. The 55% of people changing their diet was probably most surprising to me. Was there a statistic in the report that was most surprising to you that you didn't expect when you read it?
I personally didn't expect the differences in positivity between generations. I sat with the report for a good couple of weeks before I started really thinking about what I took from it, and that was the big one for me. If I think about, and I say that because I also see the statistics about where wealth sits in our generations, and I know the struggles, and I feel very strongly about the struggles of younger generations in terms of entering the property market, building wealth. And I worry about us versus them, rich versus poor, and intergenerational wealth inequity in our country. So that was the most surprising one for me, because we know that most of the wealth, including, property and super, they're the 2 asset classes that dominate Australians' balance sheets. It's all held by older Australians, so I was really surprised.
Yeah.
If you ran the poll again, would you expect the positivity to change after the budget?
Yes.
Right.
In what way? Or
Well,
why, I suppose, is a better question.
I think because people answer it in terms of their particular station in life or their particular situation. And so while if you look at, there's a lot of policy change in the budget, but we're talking a lot about CGT changes and a lot about negative gearing changes. Most people will answer that question according to their own situation. They won't answer that question in terms of what's good for the whole society or the economy or whatever. They'll think about their own situation when they're answering this, because that's what these questions are about. It's about how do you see your future, what changes are you going to make. So it's a very individual study. And so whenever there's any shift around how the future value of property, the tax bill that you might get on what you're holding, it will rationally have a impact on how people feel about the future. If you think that you're going to pay more tax on your ETFs and share portfolio as you save for a house, and you're no longer entitled to a tax discount, hang on a minute, as it is, it's hard enough. It's 8 times salary, and now I'm going to have to pay more tax as well. So now, what's interesting with capital gains tax is shares are no more attractive or less attractive than property. They're both taxed exactly the same way. So this is not about feeling better or worse about property versus shares versus whatever. It's just feeling different in an absolute sense because you think that your tax bill is going to go up. And if your tax bill goes up, it's going to take you longer to get there. So I think it's a very rational response.
Anyone else? We've still got time for a couple more. Will you you guys run the report again because of the Iran war and the impacts?
It's an interesting
I think maybe you'll have to do it again.
I don't know. We've got to be careful because what we're trying to do here is build up a long range view of what's happening. And if we run it at every time there's something, we'll be seeing you like every month, right? There's always going to be something in the environment that causes us to go, oh, here we go again, an interest rate rise, a budget, a policy change, or whatever it might be. I don't know. It could be a media cycle. Who knows? Could be the first time we report property prices after negative gearing is removed. I'm not sure, but we might stick to that every few years. I mean, I love seeing everyone, but I think there are other consumer confidence indicators that you can look at if you want a more short-run view. I think this is much more deeper about the psychology of money and actions that people take.
Do you plan on extending out the questions from where they are at the moment and extending out how many people take part in the survey?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll always be open to changing where we go with questions. By definition, you'll have a core set of questions we run through each survey, but we'd be silly not to extend that if we saw a change in society or the community or the environment. So let's hope next time we run it, the ratio of average house price to have average full-time income is not 8 to 1. So maybe we'll be having a different discussion. But yeah, I think that you should always be open to being agile and a bit curious. I think that's the other thing with this is just constant curiosity around wanting to understand things better and connecting the dots, not just within the report, but to things outside the report as well. You can tell I could talk forever about this because I find it really interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think journos love to hear, we love a statistic, we love to be able to headline a story with something like that. So, does anyone else have any questions before we wrap up formalities? No? Well, thank you, Mel, Sarah and Nathan for sharing your insights, for taking the time to come and share your stories. I think everyone found it really interesting, and it's worth noting if you guys do want to grab Nathan or Sarah or Mel afterwards to hear a bit more about their stories or about the report, you're more than welcome to. But yeah, more drinks, more food, enjoy, and happy almost weekend. Almost.
Yay!